Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project. Copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is Bigfoot 101, another in the ongoing classes that we will talk about. First of all, a couple things. Some people sent in some absolutely cool stuff. Somebody owns a little leather place, made this cross that's awesome. It's going on our wall. And somebody made a little pull, the same person made a little pull toy for Huck. And Huck is outside the room right now and sleeping. Let me talk about the conference that I just came from in Golden, Colorado this last weekend. It was outstanding. Jim Myers from the Sasquatch Outpost really did a phenomenal job. And myself, Harvey Pratt, and another speaker held down the fort. Had some great people in there. A lot of great visitors, great stories. People were just really friendly. Now what did I do? Showed this movie Thursday night, Missing 411, the UFO Connection. You need to watch it if you haven't. And then Friday we did a meet and greet where 50 people came in and were able to talk to us. It was a lot of fun. And then Saturday we had the conference. What did I talk about? I talked about Bigfoot DNA. A lot of it what has been here on this class. And I talked about Bigfoot hair. I talked about our collection methods. All that kind of stuff that you guys already have had. So what are we going to do today? So I went through the some more of the track records, and friends, I've got enough track records to fill a room. I could talk about it for months. But before I do that, I had a pretty interesting email from Steve Isdahl, your friend and mine. And he said, hey Dave, can you do me a favor and tell the folks that I'm in Bigfoot YouTube jail. And apparently he got in and was talking about some things he shouldn't have been talking about, apparently, according to YouTube. And they put him in jail for a while. Now, actually, him and his girlfriend are out of the country right now on a little vacation. He wanted to tell everybody he's doing good and that he will be out of YouTube jail, and he is very, very mad. When you get Steve mad, he actually becomes even a better and more fun person to listen to, in my humble opinion. But he said, Dave, could you just tell the fans that this is what's going on? I said, yeah, I will. So Steve's okay. He's doing fine. Just to let you know. Now, a lot of people have said, well, Dave, what do you think of Steve? Steve is my brother from another mother. I mean, we think alike, we live alike, we are alike. And from the first time I ever met the guy, it was like we've known each other forever. So don't look for me to say anything bad about him. Don't try to fish for something bad from me. We're different people, so we have a different way of doing things, but that doesn't mean that we aren't buddies. Now, getting back to the conference this weekend, Harvey Pratt. Harvey was, I don't know what you call it, notified that he was one of Oklahomans of the year. I guess there's a handful of people who are nominated and are made the top Oklahomans for the year, and Harvey was one of them. He's been in the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Hall of Fame. He's been in a Hall of Fame of like 5 or 6 different things. And then he got this honor from from the state. Unbelievable. Now I was around Harvey all weekend. I honestly don't think there's a finer human being. I try, every time I'm around him, it makes me a better person. Angie and I drove him around all weekend. Got there on a Thursday. We actually got there on a Wednesday. Then Harvey came in early. And we had a great time. He lives just outside of Oklahoma City. He's got a big piece of property out there. And he and his wife, Gina, another great soul. Gina couldn't make it. So Angie and I just kind of took care of Harvey for the weekend. 80 years old. And if I ever make it to 80, I hope I'm that aware and alive that as he is. He did a great presentation talking about Native American ways and Bigfoot. And he talked a lot about the research that he and I had done over the years together. And then he talked about the perception that people have about Native Americans. He talked about that a bit. And it's unfortunate that some people have a very twisted and demented opinion about some of the stories that come out of the Native American culture. I'm one of those people that I get mad about that because I've met too many Native Americans, First Nations, that are just phenomenal individuals, and their stories make 100% sense to us. So, yeah, he did a really good job presenting, talking. Then we engaged people. We had a little stand there where we sold some of our books. And I got to say, it was one of the best weekends I've had in a long time. So thanks for Jim Meyer from the Sasquatch Outpost for putting that together. And I guess in my groggy state, I said a while back that Jim was the person to contact regarding Alaska Bigfoot cruise. I was wrong. So all you have to do is Google Alaska Bigfoot cruise and you'll find the connection point. And that'll be in September of this year. And then in April of this year, I'm going to be doing a Florida Bigfoot conference. And if you just Google Florida Gator Bigfoot Conference, it's put on by the same organization that's putting on the Bigfoot cruise. Google that, you'll find that conference as well. And I think that's the only two things I have signed up for right now. I've had a ton of really nice offers from people and organizations, but I've got too much on my plate right now as it is, and I'm just trying to stay alive, stay upright, because I'm so tired sometimes. Regarding the movie, it's kind of interesting looking at the numbers of people who have purchased the movie. So I have 402,000 followers right here on YouTube. So less than 10% of the followers on YouTube have rented or watched or purchased the movie. I think that's pretty bad. In my own humble opinion, why would you be here if you didn't want to follow our research? I think I've got approaching 39,000 followers on YouTube. David Paulides at Can-Am Missing. So not even all of them have watched the movie. I'm kind of stunned by that, honestly. But it is what it is. I got to say that I've had a lot of people who I haven't contacted in the past about Bigfoot or about missing people have contacted me and have started to buy my books, which is a good thing, because I do think as you read, it gives you a deeper understanding of the topic than watching something. Too many things can occupy your mind while you're watching, and when you're reading, you have to pretty much focus, in my humble opinion, if you truly want to understand something. I've always gotten the most out of a topic by reading. And I'm going to read you some more today about Bigfoot. Now, there were some questions about what I was reading out of in the last episode. And this is Bigfoot Special Edition Track Record number 14. Now, the special editions didn't make it in the USB that we sell because the USB got up to capacity and we could only fit in the newsletters. To add a second CD to the packet would have been cost prohibitive and nobody would have bought it. So we just held it to the newsletters themselves. And I'm going to be talking about those a little bit today too. Now, in this edition, I'm going to talk to you about some things that, and some stories that I'm going to try to bring full circle in the next couple of classes. So, the first story comes out of the 14th special newsletter. A wealthy man, this is called the Wendigo, the Defago story. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent listening to the wind howling and trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling. And the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in a corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What's this all about? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. But the wind continued to calm, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. Suddenly he jumped to his feet and he began to run from the tent, but the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went, and again he cried, "On my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire." Then his voice faded away and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went into the woods, down to the lake, then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. That would have been strange in itself. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first he thought that Defago had fallen into the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something else had pulled him off the ice into the sky. But that made no sense, as he stood wondering what happened. The wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my burning feet." But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since. Maybe it was the Wendigo, one of them said, and he laughed. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. Do you know anything about him? No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. Are you all right? He asked. No answer. To get a good look, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a bale of ashes. Note, this short story was taken from a collection of folklore retold by Alvin Schwartz. Schwartz notes the following. This Indian tale also is a summer camp tale that is well known in northern United States. It is adapted from a version that Professor Edward M. Ives of the University of Maine narrated for me. He first heard it in the 1930s when he attended Camp Curtis Reed, a Boy Scout camp in Mahopac, New York. Now, why is that important? Well, if you're a 411 follower, this is going to ring, In Michigan, back several years ago, a man was attending college, and he went out cross-country skiing in the snow along the beach, along the Great Lakes, and he took his skis off and he walked out onto the ice and he disappeared. Very similar to DeFago. Months and months and months later, he ended up waking up on a lawn in Massachusetts, not far from his parents' home. He made it to his parents' home and they were stunned, because search and rescue had a belief that he must have fallen through the ice, just like they stated, almost exactly like he stated here. When I read this story, the similarities are so close. Now, this man that disappeared in Michigan, later in life he became a psychologist. I tried to contact him about a story. He wouldn't return my calls. I did write about the story, and it's in our books. But I was still stunned at the similarities, and especially since they said it's a northern U.S. story. Too close. Too close. Okay, the next one is Bigfoot and other paranormal phenomena on the Yakima Indian Reservation. Lots of weird things happened in the 60s and 70s on the Yakima Indian Reservation and allegedly continue to this day. Is there a connection between Bigfoot and, well, other stuff? You decide. Please note that none of the authors on the links below make an effort to link the various phenomena. A letter from William J. Fogel, Staff Fire Control Officer. And then there's an entry here, November 9th, 1975, Bigfoot in the news. An Irishman on the trail of Bigfoot, International Herald Tribune, October 23rd, 75. Bigfoot monster roams west. The New Haven Register, the Alaska Statesman. And they list all of these articles. Then it goes on, The Truth About the Bigfoot Legend by Linda Milligan. The ambiguity inherent in belief legends makes it all but impossible for the folklorist to presume to know the truth about Bigfoot. Such assertions are likely to be the root subjective, and they draw folklorists into the legend debate, a process they would be better to observe than to participate. Observations of the debate process within culture can reveal a great deal about the Bigfoot legend. One can better understand how emergent beliefs become legend in a contemporary context. The debate within culture is occurring at two levels: the published writings of Bigfoot researchers and in the memorates of the conjectures of ordinary people who are especially interested. The second part of this paper briefly describes the debate about Bigfoot's nature as reflected in the popular press. The third influenced the thinking of active bearers of the legend in central Ohio. In his article, Humanoids and Anomalous Lights, Taxonomic and Epidemiological Problems, David Huford argues that it is possible that some reports of Bigfoot may not be legend at all. Rather, some might be reports based on what he terms as objective, real referent, that sometimes becomes embedded in a traditional narrative and sometimes not. Huford asserts that large hair-covered bipeds reported in different parts of the world under a variety of names might actually exist. The accounts of Bigfoot's size and appearance are quite similar across the U.S. and Canada. Duh. This fieldwork demonstrates that his consistency can always be explained through traditional sense. Many of his informants were unaware of traditional accounts elsewhere. The accounts he collected either alluded to traditional materials nor were told with these material characteristic elaboration. Huford argues that it is plausible that Bigfoot exists. Distribution of the reports across North American continent and other parts of the world may indicate widespread observation of the creature. It is also possible, he points out, that the creature is the subject of a tradition that is far more widespread and far more conservative than folklorists recognize. In any case, Huford warns folklorists not to explain the accounts purely in psychological terms. Such an assumption might prove to be, in his words, the same kind of embarrassing error that led to the 18th century astronomers, unaware of meteorites, to discount reports by farmers who observed hot boulders falling into their fields. Ha ha ha, good point. The truth then about whether or not Bigfoot exists is as yet disputable. Folklorists can shed some light on the subject. Huford's objective analysis demonstrates the plausibility of Bigfoot's existence, but demonstrating plausibility and proving that it is so are very different. Folklorists cannot provide the kind of evidence necessary to prove the existence of Bigfoot or other entities whose existence is disputed. To those who are not already convinced, we collect investigative and analyze texts, not Bigfoot carcasses, crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft, or bottled ghosts. While folklorists can discern some truths from these texts, the absolute truth about core belief is no shining pearl that we can emerge. That pearl remains obscure. Truth in most instances becomes a matter of faith, not fact. Now, this was written in 2001, way before DNA became solidified in our world. According to Linda Degg, the essence of belief or legend is a very dispute over a truth which remains veiled. Real folk legend, according to Degg and Vessoni, must produce a reason and feasibility to produce faith, to take a stand for or against belief. Folklorists who take a position for or against belief are entering this dispute and therefore participating in the legend process. When a legend is socially dysfunctional, that may seem the right thing to do. But I think it is questionable whether folklorists' assertions, however reasonable they may seem, can effectively resolve the dispute without being grounded in indisputable evidence. The truth about Bigfoot, for the time being, is no more available to folklorists than to anyone else. But because our field work puts us into direct contact with non-believers as well as believers, it is difficult to sit on the sidelines watching the two groups pelt each other. We sometimes are drawn in. In the middle of the dispute, not on one or the other side or outside, it is all together. It is the best place to be observe the legend process. The evidence is ambiguous because it is difficult to verify and because it is often accompanied by negative evidence. In the case of Bigfoot, the positive evidence is usually the personal testimonies of the witnesses. They are often accompanied by reports of Bigfoot's unique scream, odor, by photographers and plaster casts, footprints, by hair and feces samples. There's negative evidence as well. If all the personal testimonies are true, and Bigfoot inhabits all of North America, how could this creature have eluded forest rangers, zoologists, and Bigfoot hunters all these years? And why have no carcasses or bones been found? The sum of the evidence for and against the creature's existence taken together defies easy answers. Explanations that all but ignore part of the evidence may require a stretch of the imagination as greater than anything collected in the field, as in the conclusion of the article, Abdominal Snowman or Bigfoot, a psychoanalytic search for the origin of Yeti and Sasquatch tales. One aspect of the Yeti and Sasquatch that remains difficult to explain is the extraordinarily large number of sighted footprints. The geographical distribution of tracks and the difficulty in making these tracks cannot be easily ignored. That's right. Those who reserve evidence of Bigfoot are aware of its ambiguity, so they themselves often debate whether the creature actually exists, where it resides, and what its nature. Rather than attempt to resolve the debate, I have chosen instead to focus on Bigfoot debate itself in an effort to increase our understanding of the legend. The essence of the legend is debate. So if we see how proponents of the active Bigfoot legend conduct themselves, we can see how the legend changes. According to David Huford, Bigfoot-like creatures were first reported in the West in 1921 when Lieutenant Colonel Howard Bury, following a failed attempt to climb to the top of Mount Everest, described to reporters a large upright animal seen in the Himalayas by some members of a party. One reported research Bury's story and discovered further accounts among people who lived in the region of a fur-covered man-like animal. Ivan Sanderson writes that the term adopted by the media for the creature, abominable snowman, was born from a misinterpretation of the term from locals gave the creature. Before the state, there had been scattered newspaper accounts of hair-covered human-like monsters or wild men in America, as well as stories similar to creatures among North American Indians. But David Huford, I believe, is correct in his assertion that widespread knowledge of such creatures originated with press accounts in the Himalayas. Janet and Colin Board report in the Bigfoot Casebook that there are only a few North American Bigfoot accounts available for the first 4 decades of the century, as compared to the numbers today. The reason that there may have been as many sightings, but that people were more isolated and did not know to whom to take these reports. Or maybe they were embarrassed to say anything. Whether or not there were many sightings, these early accounts of wild men, mountain devils, and man-apes likely created fertile soil for Bigfoot stories. The description of the creature is fairly stable. It's a hairy, ape-like creature who stands between 7 and 8 feet tall, reported to have a foul odor, loud scream, descriptive details sometimes vary. It's reported by some to have reddish-brown hair and others to have a dark gray hair. And as we have explained, that depends on its age. The massive size and depth of footprints attest to its size, but sometimes the footprints reveal 5 toes and at other times 3. Generally, the creature is described as being reclusive and not a danger to humans, but sometimes it is reported to have invaded human territory. John Green writes in Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us, that the Himalayan abominable snowman is actually a Yeti, which is smaller and less erect than the North American Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Interesting stuff, I would say. In the early 70s, the debate about Bigfoot's nature centered on whether or not it was an ancient ape, a human-like creature, or an ape man. But as early as '68, accounts emerged linking Bigfoot to UFOs. Pay attention. But as early as '68, accounts emerged linking Bigfoot to UFOs. Janet and Colin Board report that witnesses in Salem, Ohio saw large, shadowy, man-like creatures, a large cat-like creature, and a UFO near the home. In the 70s, similar reports proliferated, particularly in Pennsylvania. So how could you ignore those? And that is my question. Now, let's go on here. Stan Gordon, director of the Pennsylvania Association of Study of the Unexplained, writes that in '73, Pennsylvania experienced its largest wave of Bigfoot sightings, with over 100 documented reports involving 250 witnesses. Gordon's group noted that in many instances, UFOs were reported in the same area shortly before the creature was sighted. Ka-ching! The suspected link was confirmed in the case briefly described earlier when a young man, along with his young brothers, saw 2 Bigfoot-like creatures standing just below a hovering UFO. Gordon believes the 2 phenomena are linked, although he is not certain how. And who did I say was some of the most influential people in my world on Bigfoot? One of them was Stan Gordon. Stan decided to take a step and tell the truth and stand out amongst people who are naysayers. Thank you, Stan. And they talk about UFO psychic phenomena, apparitions, the Eastern Panther, poltergeist. They argue that common sense dictates that the large numbers of sane people who report these manifestations may not all be seeing things. Yet they ask, why, if they are real, are there no bodies or bones, no live specimens locked securely in zoos and laboratories? Well, if it was an animal, it would be. But it's not a normal animal, so it's not. lore is usually communicated in memorots, but these memorots are only one part of the communication process that may include the sharing of photographs, drawings, plaster casts, hair samples, beliefs, etc. Such sharing took place at the home of Reverend B, who lives in a small rural community about 30 miles northwest of Columbus, Ohio, where he was a pastor of a small non-denominational church. He told me about a small group of game hunters who, when spotted the creature in the woods, were so frightened that they backed out of the woods with their rifles pointed and cocked. One of these brave coon hunters made the mistake of describing the event to the Reverend, who said to me that he likes to torment the fellow, that he probably backed all the way home. Reverend B also told me that about a birthday party, surprise encounter with a Bigfoot. Evidently, a large family gathering took place to celebrate the birthday of an East Liberty, Ohio man. His family pooled their resources to buy him an easy chair. The evening of the party, the man's mother asked him to recline in the chair that had been placed in front of a picture window so that she might take a photograph of him enjoying the new gift. The man leaned back in the chair and his feet up, and the mother focused the camera. When she looked through the viewfinder, she saw a pair of eyes looking through the picture window behind her son. She snapped the camera, and although the glare from the glass distorted the photo of Bigfoot, according to Reverend B, it is the best picture of a creature he has collected. Family members have told the Reverend that since then the creature has visited the home many times. I have never seen that picture. I have only heard of it. A farmer in the vicinity heard Bigfoot noises outside his home around 11 o'clock in the evening. Suspecting that it was the same culprit who had recently siphoned gas from his tank, he slipped quietly out the back door, hoping to catch the thief in the act. Instead, he saw Bigfoot standing in his driveway, only about 50 feet from where the farmer stood, lighted from behind by a security lamp on the barn. The farmer's Siberian Husky was on a chain that could reach halfway between the farmer and the creature. Bigfoot was lunging at the dog as if to tease it. Eventually, the farmer thought to turn on his back porch light to get a better look at it. But that light frightened the creature, who left in such a haste that he ran into a maple tree. The farmer said it shook the whole tree and broke branches where it hit. The farmer called Reverend B to the scene, and they measured the highest branch that it broke off at 8 feet from the ground. Okay, and then an article, it was in the San Francisco Examiner, September 24th, 1974, top column. Bigfoot tracks human hair. Cougar, Washington. The leader of a scientific Sasquatch hunt says strands of hair found with human, man-like footprints in a remote area near Mount St. Helens have been identified as human. Robert Morgan, director of the American Yeti expedition, said yesterday that his base camp here, it's something we're very excited about. Morgan, leader of the summer expedition searching for the legendary Bigfoot, says many people have suggested Sasquatch is some kind of ape, but he said the new evidence eventually could lead to a proof Bigfoot is human. Bam! Robert Morgan, a very smart man. Additional examples from the New World legends. The British Columbian equivalent of the Yeti or abominable snowman is a Sasquatch, a creature sufficiently celebrated, share a news heading in the New York Times with Queen Elizabeth, August 30th, 1959. The Sasquatch, a demon which apparently originated in Indian folklore, became well known to Canadian whites during the 19th century. The following story from Gold Rush days probably represents a distortion of the Indian concept which diffused into Alaska, although it could conceivably be an adaptation of a European belief. The ubiquity of the wild man motif will be illustrated. During the Klondike Rush of 1898 to 1899, miners claimed to encounter a sinister glacial demon, which bears a marked resemblance to the abominable snowman as depicted in the tabloids. The only information about this phantasm seems to be given by Captain W.R. Abercrombie, 2nd U.S. Infantry, who was ordered to Alaska to undertake specific tasks in the Exploration War Department. In April 1899, the captain landed on the coast of southern Alaska at Port Valdez, a short distance from the Valdez Glacier, which was one of the routes prospectors tried to utilize it that winter as an entry to the Klondike. He found a destitute horde of would-be miners defeated by scurvy and subarctic winter, existing in flimsy, dirty, overcrowded hutments. In his description of the down-and-out prospectors, Captain Abercrombie mentions the glacial demon with an emphasis that leaves no doubt that the men's sincere belief in reality. I noticed in talking to these men that over 70% of them were more or less mentally deranged. My attention was first directed to this fact by their reference of a glacial demon. One big, raw-boned Swede in particular described to me how this demon had strangled his son on the glacier. His story being that he had just started a 12-mile plant, a small collection of huts just across the coast range, with his son to go to the coast in company with some of the other prospectors. Halfway up the summit of the glacier, his son, who was ahead of him hauling a sled while he was behind pushing, called to him saying that the demon had attacked him and had his arms around his neck. The father ran to the son's assistance, but as he described it, his son, being very strong, soon drove the demon away, and they passed on their way up toward the summit of the glacier. The weather was cold, the wind blowing hard, and soon it made travel very difficult in passing over the ice between the huge crevices, which was necessary to pick their way through the gain to the summit. While in the thickest of these crevices, the demon again appeared. He is said to be a small, heavy-built man and very active. He again sprang on the son's shoulder, this time with such a grasp that although the father did all he could to release him, the demon finally strangled the young man. The old man then put the son on a sled and brought him down to 12-mile camp, where the other prospectors helped bury him. During the recital of the tale, this old man's eyes would blaze, and he would go through all the actions to illustrate just how he fought off this imaginary demon. When I heard the story, there were 10 or 12 other men in the cabin, and at that time it would not have been safe to dispute the theory of the existence of the demon on the Valdez Glacier. I was informed by Mr. Brown that this was a common form of mental derangement incident to those form of scurvy. Sanderson, after documenting the case for unknown hominids in British Columbia and Northern California, presents reports of narhumans from a number of places in Mexico. The Yaqui Indians believe in the existence of large hairy men who live in an immense unexplored canyon in the Sierra Madre Occidental. The Chiapans give a place in their folklore to a mysterious well-known variously as Salva, and the inhabitants around Cubalco tell stories of fur-covered man-like creature larger than human whom they fear greatly. I've not heard many credible stories come out of Mexico. Now, when I read this, it's interesting, but I wish there were more. So, these are good because you now have some reference points besides what you've had in just North America or in just the United States. Got a few more here that I want to read to you. How many people here have heard of a researcher named Jim McLaren? Now, if you go into Facebook and you put in that name, Jim McLaren, M-C-C-L-A-R-I-N, I'm friends with him on Facebook. Jim is an entomologist that works in Central America, but he posts on Facebook all the time. He actually is one of those guys that lives in the jungle and does great work. Well, when he was younger, he lived up in Northern California and was a Bigfoot researcher. Researcher Jim McLaren. And so this story is in the track record number 27, May of 93, volume 3, number 5. Personal correspondence to Haas dated July 30th, 1970 relates that an unidentified Willow Creek, California source informed him of having heard several double clunks sounding like someone knocking stones together underwater while he and several other individuals were viewing Bigfoot tracks in the vicinity of Capel Creek, west of Bluff Creek, in the Six Rivers National Forest. The noises, it was said, were coming from a strand of alder trees adjacent to the trail of prints and a short distance away. No mention is made of whether or not the parties involved investigated the apparent source. In the same letter, McLaren also reports being told by a Salyer, S-A-L-Y-E-R, resident that he had heard the sound of stones being clunked together in an especially remote canyon near Mount Lassen in the late 1950s. The informant felt that this was an odd occurrence due to the location. That Capel Creek, C-A-P-P-E-L-L, west of Bluff Creek, been in it many times. Very uncomfortable place. Never saw anything weird. But I was always alone, and I was always in these places way back there. And I never felt quite right. So, this next one, I've talked about Archie Buckley before from a Bay Area research group. Archie Buckley of the well-known Bay Area group reported hearing clunking noises like stones being pounded together while bigfooting in Begum Basin on North Yollobole Mountain in California's Trinity National Forest, June 17, 1970. Buckley, accompanied by his son Bill, listened for an estimated 5 minutes to a repeated series of double or triple clunks, which were very loud and distinct. As a purely historical note, it may be appropriate to add here that the Yollobole region, which includes other noted Bigfoot sites such as Basin Gulch and Westlow Gap, was a hotbed of Sasquatch activity through most of the 60s and 70s, and as such was a subject of extensive study by members of the Bay Area group, whose dedicated efforts have not yet been fully or properly acknowledged. Too many not to mention here. Those yet remaining who know who they are deserve much credit. That Bay Area group sightings are on our website, nabigfootsearch.com. I've got all of their newsletters on our site. My personal favorite, perhaps, which so closely resembles my own experience with which I began this article, was related to researcher Bob Titmus, then at Kitimat, British Columbia, but formerly of California. In a letter to Haas dated September 13, 1970. In 1958 or 59, Titmus and a companion were following extremely fresh Bigfoot tracks along Upper Bluff Creek, Northern California. So that was 8-9 years before the Patterson-Gimlin film. When they heard what sounded like something pounding on a hollow log or tree with a very big club. The noises were coming from an area of dense timber and undergrowth about 40 yards from the partner's location and seemed to occur, Titmus said, in an almost coded series. I assume him to have meant precisely metered, rhythmical sounds. After some time it had elapsed, Titmus located a log and stick of his own and began to repeat the sequence, only to be answered in kind by the still hidden would-be musician. This she beat several minutes, and every time Titmus exchanged the number or timing of his own blows. His unknown counterpart followed suit exactly. His companion finally became nervous and wanted to leave, allowing Titmus only a very cursory examination of the area, which produced no evidence, but he concludes his report with this very matter-of-fact statement. Don't bother yourself wondering if it could have been any of the usual animals or another man. It wasn't. Although that may strike some readers as entirely too definite of a remark to make in light of finding no evidence, it should be said that Titmus was widely regarded amongst his peers as an expert woodsman and one of the most proficient Bigfoot trackers in the business. Definitely not an amateur and not a man inclined to rash commentary. Next one. Professor Boris Porshnev, former chairman of the USSR Academy of Sciences History Institute, Moscow, long considered the preeminent Russian authority on the subject of relic hominids, wrote in December 1771 that he was aware of two particular cases of rock-pounding behavior among the Almasti, so-called wild men of the Soviet Caucasus. One is unspecified and contains no details. The other involved the famous Zana, a female Almasti captured by the villagers of Tikhina at the end of the last century, kept as a pet and eventually domesticated. Zana, according to Porshnev, was said to enjoy arranging rocks into piles as a pastime and frequently was observed pounding them together in an effort, it was thought, to chip them. Porshnev also commented on a number of unconfirmed reports that the Almasti allegedly were fond of creating similar pounding noises by banging on metal objects. Many versions of the Zena story exist, though all but few seemingly overlook the rock pounding behavior. Why is this important? Because Zena, everything I've read on that was as close to a human as you can imagine, but was thought to be a Bigfoot or Almasty. Now I'm going over to the track record number 28, June 93, issue 3, volume 6. A couple of things I wanted to read here. I've spent a lot of time in the Yukon Territory in Canada. Remote does not properly define the areas we were in. Really remote. And the areas we were in, we never saw anybody else. J. Collins, Manitoba, Canada, notes from the letter of August 5th, 1976, heard on radio hotline program in Faro, Yukon. Mr. Taylor told radio, 85 years old, he had seen in his work large beings full of hair many times as a trapper in the 30s and 40s in a river canyon in the Yukon called the Nanati. The place in particular is called Dead Man's Canyon. He states that they were large beings and very friendly. However, when he tried to get close to them, they just casually walked away. The radio station was a local one from Whitehorse in the Yukon. Next one, a couple of boys from Fernie, BC in 75 saw Bigfoot in a field near Fernie. Reported it to a local radio station there. I was in BC at the time. It was the month of May of 75. I just found the information from Yukon enlightening, just because in the back of my mind, every time I've been there, I thought, if there was ever a place Bigfoot's going to be, it's going to be here. But the winters there are just horrendous. Gary Ouellette, Montana, notes a letter from October 7th, 1976. He told her, a man told a bookstore owner that he was snowmobiling last winter in Idaho, just south and west of Libby, Montana. He had fallen behind his brother upon taking a shortcut or something. He had run across these tracks thought to be snowshoes. Upon closer examination, he saw toe prints. He got quite scared from what she said and found his brother and simply told him he was cold and he was going in. That area south and west of Libby, Joe Hauser and his wife Tammy went there camping in their trailer. And they were parked quite a ways from anybody. And in the middle of the night, something pounded on the side of their trailer. Joe happened to tell me that a while ago. And that was after I told him that Angie and I had been in that area and gotten a creepy feeling. So maybe my intuition was right. Now, I have done a segment on someone who went missing from this area that this story talks about, which is fascinating. Jim Hukin, fresh back from British Columbia, met a miner that had come down from the Butte Inlet on the coast. He told Jim that his employees had seen Bigfoot in that area several times, and they had brought down a sample of a dropping that was originally 12 inches long and quite thick, found June 28th. It was gray in color and had fibrous hairs in it. Jim had a biologist from Vancouver Island check the dropping, and they came to the conclusion, as bears had just started coming out 2 weeks earlier, that it was a fecal plug, or the first dump the bear took on emerging from its den. Doesn't matter to me what that was. The point was is that Butte Inlet, they had seen Bigfoot there. I find that fascinating. Betty Unger and Dallas Yellowfly, 10 miles northwest of Harrison Hot Springs. This is very close to where the first story in this movie took place. Pay attention. 1989, about 4 p.m., returning from skiing, rounded a bend in the road and saw a small black bear ascending a steep bank below the road. Stopped to watch it, reached the road, and stood erect. It was not a bear, but biped, less than 6 feet tall, covered with dark brown hair. It crossed the road diagonally toward them, coming within about 30 feet. Face was dark, but with little hair. Expression and muscle and eye movement clearly seen. It paused, looked at them, then jumped up the bank above the road, looked back down at them, then climbed the hill and into the trees faster than a human could move. See, to me, that's interesting. And you say, well, why, Dave? Every time that I have a missing person that's never been found, if I can find UFO activity, Bigfoot activity, other paranormal activity, I find it interesting. I keep an open mind about it, and I put that in my memory banks. Now that last story, right in the area of the first story here. If you ever get a chance to go to Harrison Hot Springs, do it. A beautiful little town with quite some Bigfoot notoriety. So, I hope that has helped you a little bit. And here's why. All of these things I read in getting to my opinion on this topic, I want you to understand that it wasn't just a little bit of information. It's been a whole lot of information. When that person just now described the Bigfoot as having no hair on its, or little hair on its face, and then you see some of these drawings with hair all over the face, not what Harvey and I found, and not what's described right there. So, appreciate you being here. Our website, NA Bigfoot Search, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the store. You can find our DVD and Blu Ray with the extended version and the interview with John D'Souza in its long version. Also, the track record that has all of the newsletters in it is for sale there. And there's a variety of other Bigfoot stuff. We have almost all of our Bigfoot books back in stock, and we will in the next week. In the meantime, thanks for being here. I greatly appreciate you listening. Please share this with other people of interest and put it on your social media account. And hopefully, God's willing, I'll see you soon. Paulides out.